Hello and welcome to Bronze Age Monsters, the show where we wade into the weirdest and wildest waters of the comic books of the 1970s. This season on B.A.M, we're covering the brief life of Atlas Seaboard Comics, the publishing venture of Martin Goodman that some say was a middle finger to Marvel and Stan Lee. Revenge is a dish best served in 4 colors, Jacob. I'm Matt Howell.
I'm Jacob Balcom. Love the intro. Nicely done.
Oh, it's nice to be back.
Yeah.
So, folks, if you are new to the show, as we said, I'm Matt, and this is my erstwhile co-host, Jacob. And we started this show as the Werewolf by Night podcast in the fall of the COVID year. And it was a way to keep ourselves sane during the lockdowns and all the craziness in the world. And we ran out of werewolf comics, so we decided to rebrand as Bronze Age Monsters and keep talking about the 70s weird, crazy comics that we love from the publishers that everyone knows and read as kids or as adults. And so we've done Werewolf by Night. We did Man-Wolf when we needed more werewolves. Then when we switched, we became Bronze Age Monsters. We talked about Son of Satan. And then we did Marvel's Bronze Age Buffet, and we talked about all of the nearly rans and almost wases of Marvel's publishing monster boom. So The Living Mummy, The Golem, The Living Colossus. Who else am I missing? Mordred the Mystic.
Mordred the Mystic, that's right.
Brother Voodoo.
I think that's it.
How could I forget Brother Voodoo?
Holy shit, how could we forget him? The best one. Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, we talked about them, and then we decided to branch out and do some DC, and we just covered Creature Commandos. And it was a hit and miss for us. We liked some of it, we didn't like some of the other stuff, and we just decided, hey, we're old men at this point. We're not going to do this the rest of our lives. Let's do one big crazy heist and retire. And so that is this. This is season 7, and we decided to talk about an odd little corner of the 70s, Atlas Seaboard. Jacob and I both love to talk about the climate and the publishing industry of comics of the 70s, of the whole 20th century, but particularly the 70s is really weird. And so this is such an odd story that I thought was just interesting, even not even based on the content of what they published, just the story behind the stories is interesting. So we also love the idea of going back to the Bronze Age Buffet and having each episode be a different genre, because we're covering every number 1 that Atlas Seaboard published. So we're here to dig into that time, and they lived for basically 1 year. Publishing-wise, barely even a year. So, our first, as you probably read from the title of this episode, our first one is going to be covering Grim Ghost number 1. But first we want to kind of just set the table here and talk about what was going on in 1974, when this company was founded, who was behind it, maybe some of the motivations behind it, and who the talent involved, both credited on the page, maybe not credited on this page, who were in the background making this happen.
Yeah, so Matt, you seemed more familiar with the actual comics of Atlas Seaboard than I was. I mean, just being a fan of comic history and getting comic history magazines and books, like Atlas Seaboard is a pretty famous story, mostly referred to as Vengeance Inc. And it's a great story, and it's insane, and definitely should live in the 70s of comics, because that is the most batshit time period. That's a time period we've spent the most nearly all of our show in. So, but you said you were more familiar with some of the comics, like you had actually read some of
I'd read a
these?
few issues here and there. I just kind of picked them up in quarter bins as like a teen. And much like a lot of people have the same association with like Charlton Comics, they felt off-brand to me, just kind of the weird things. It was very evident that they didn't go high, that the numbers, there was nothing more than a number 4 of anything. So you could tell it was kind of a misfire. And so, but I don't remember the stories that well. And I wasn't super into the artists or writers at that point, like being like 13, 12. So, I didn't know who the names were behind them. I could just tell that they were seemingly put together right. There just was something off.
Yeah, there's absolutely something off with all of these. I mean, they're inherently very charming, but there's a strangeness. There's a strange energy that resides behind each one of these comics, and a lot of that has to do with the history and the origin of the company itself. So I don't know. I figured you and I just trade off, just kind of talking about the history of Atlas Seaboard. And I guess to talk about the history of Atlas Seaboard, you have to talk a little bit about Martin Goodman. So yeah, Martin Goodman was publisher of Marvel Comics. Was really originally the publisher of Timely Comics, and before that, yeah, pulps and men's magazines and all sorts of stuff. And yeah, he owned and published Marvel up until 1968 is when he sold the company to what then was called Perfect Film and Chemical Corporation. I think by 1970, they had changed their name to Cadence Industries Corporation, which focused mainly on publishing. Perfect Film and Chemical, it's kind of like what their name said. They owned, like, you know, photography stuff and pharmaceuticals, but then, yeah, tried to branch out into publishing. And yeah, so after that, well, I guess we have to talk a little bit about his final tenure at Marvel, which, you know, he had done a lot of good stuff. Stan Lee had done a lot of good stuff, and all the artists. Martin Goodman from the very beginning was a bit of a hack in a way that the very first thing that he ever published, he got fined for because it said, you know, all new on it. And it wasn't new. It was just stolen from someone else. So it's literally the first thing he published was a ripoff of someone else, which carries all the way through to Atlas Seaboard, which we'll talk about as these characters come up, because each one of them, you know, we'll get into it later, but, you know, editor Jeff Roven's like, let's license this. And Goodman's like, no, let's just rip it off. We'll just make our own characters, which is literally what he did his entire thing. You know, the famous story of him, you know, telling Stan to basically just do a ripoff of Justice League. And Stan does a Fantastic Four. So this is a theory. This is a theme that is run throughout Martin Goodman. So artistically, a little devoid, but business-wise, he was a pretty good businessman. He was a pretty ruthless businessman. You know, there's also the famous story of the Atlas implosion, where this Atlas we're talking about, in between Timely and Marvel, there was Atlas Comics, which are some of my favorites. And the story goes, you know, the Atlas stuff was very high quality, lots of really cool people working. They had a real big inventory that it sounds like Martin Goodman found one day in a closet and realized that he had, like, you know, a year's worth of stories, fires everyone. And so, you know, he's maybe not remembered as the nicest guy. Some people have nice things to say about him. Others, a lot do not. But he was just a businessman, you know. He's just a cigar-chomping businessman, not an artist, but just a publisher. And starting back in the pulp days, publishers it was the Wild West. And so, yeah, Martin was, that was him. So, yeah, before I turn it over to you, Matt, I wanted to talk about the one thing that he left Marvel, but right before he sold it to Perfect Chemical. This was his giant coup that he did, to where, and it's this thing that's kind of been discussed in different magazines. Matt, you said both of us kind of have a bit of a hard time fully grasping all the ins and outs of it. But I'm going to give it a go. So
I feel like you need yarn and, you know, tax and
I do.
board.
So yes, I did a little synopsis. We'll see if this works. So yeah, the last year of his tenure at Marvel, he basically tried to successfully tricked DC Comics into committing to this super high page count and pricing change that ended up being a disaster for them in ways that I kind of understand.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it was bad. Like, even Carmine Infantino was just like, it was a slaughter. And this was because of Martin Goodman doing this, Marvel overtook DC as the best-selling comic for the first time in both the company's history. Yes, this was the first time. Okay, so what he did is that, so Marvel raised their page count of its regular titles from 32 pages to 48 pages. And they raised their price from 15 to 25 cents. So DC immediately decided they have to compete. So they increased their page count 100% from 32 pages to 64 pages, and also, you know, upped their price. And so it says that within a month, Goodman immediately dropped the page count back to 32 pages and only reduced the price 5 cents to 20 cents. So basically what he did, and what I think is, so it talks about that Marvel was able to also give their wholesalers a 50% discount off the line compared to DC's 40%. And also the other thing that is brought up is that Marvel's comics were all new material. When DC upped their pages, they padded it with a lot of reprints. And so that was kind of how they were portraying it. It's just like, well, this is all new stuff and it's cheaper. So you can get 5 comics for $1 from Marvel. Like, isn't that amazing? And it was, and people did it. So what happened was, it seems that DC couldn't immediately change their page count or their pricing, because it seems like because they're such a big company, they had to commit to how much paper.
That's my impression.
A full year's supply of paper. And someone brought out, there's something that even like some of the articles that we're getting a lot of this from were like, we need to do some research about that. It was something about like Nixon's fair pricing, fixing, and federal, like that's a whole other shit that we don't have time to deal with. But yeah, so they were trapped. It says that that year, it was all the time that Marvel needed to just come out on top and become the best-selling comic company. And
so a byproduct of that, like you were saying, like with DC answering and saying, we're going to do you one better, we're going to 64. Like you said, they were padding that with reprints. And at this point in time, like in 70, 71, whatever this was, that seemed like reprint. I mean, there had been such a revolution culturally in every sense, right? So DC saying, well, let's take this old Alan Scott Green Lantern story and just shove it in the back of this thing. That felt really fucking old, like when Watergate's going on. Like, so that was like a death, like it's a double whammy. Like, not only is it, we committed all this money and overextended ourselves financially to get all this paper for a year of this, whatever these commitments, they were also like saying, we're also kind of the fuddy-duddy your parents' comics now, because all this, Speedy's shooting up, but also on the other back, there's this old-timey thing where everyone's, World War II era comics and stuff like that. So it felt old and old-fashioned. So that was a double blow, and I think.
Yeah, absolutely. They weren't relevant anymore, and Marvel was so much more relevant. I mean, yeah, like you say, there was adult and mature stuff going on in DC in the early 70s. But, I mean, compared to Marvel, I don't know. It just, but DC had its very cool stuff. But it seemed spotty. And on the whole, it seemed like Marvel was much more new, much more with it and hip. And that's what kids buying the comics thought. So, because they bought the shit out of them, and DC went to second place, which was a huge blow to poor Carmine Infantino.
Whether it was earned or not, Marvel definitely had that rep of being the young, hip, cool young guns of the comics industry, and DC kind of felt a little out of step.
Yeah, I mean, and Marvel had that rep in the 60s, but they were still just an indie upstart. Like, they weren't even, numbers-wise, DC was just like, whatever. But not anymore. So it was pretty cool. So Martin Goodman, that was a pretty shrewd move that he did. He was a shrewd businessman, but I love this. This shows, I think this first move shows that later in life, and maybe this has been there all along, but spite and competition seemed to really drive this old man. He just really wanted to stick it to whoever he was mad at. Yeah. And so he sticks it to DC. Everyone's carrying him on their shoulders. He's a hero. Then he sells out to Perfect Film and Chemical. And Matt, I mean, I guess take it over and let's talk about Chip and handshake agreements.
I was just gonna say before that, like I'm pretty sure he'd worked with Stan since Timely, right? Like when Stan was young. So Stan had studied at his feet for a long time. So after he left, we talked a couple episodes ago about how Stan killed Skywald with all the black and white horror books in the early mid 70s. I'm sure he learned that from Goodman. You know what I mean? Like, wait a minute, they're making money that could be mine. Let's just publish 10 black and white horror comics and kill them in 1 year. And they did. Or not 1 year, but a few years. But I mean, still, that's definitely echoes of that. So, yeah, he brought his son Chip in under his wing in the late 60s. And I've read a lot. We've been reading, by the way, this season, we're going to be referencing Tomorrow's Publishing's Comic Book Artist number 16, which was published in 2001, which is almost entirely dedicated to the Atlas Seaboard story. So it's got interviews with creators, editors, everyone's perspective. It's fascinating. So I highly recommend you go and pick that up. I think you can get the PDF for like $5 on Tomorrow's website.
Yeah, and comparing it with other articles or other YouTube videos that I've seen, it's like this is the Bible for Atlas Seaboard. Everything else kind of starts getting stuff wrong and starts but this is the thing to get. Totally agree.
So the impression I've got from just reading the first half of this magazine is that Chip was Martin's son. He brought him in the Marvel offices. No one really seemed to appreciate him or his offerings that much. He wasn't an artistic person. He didn't really have a business background, a publishing background. He just came in and kind of was the boss's son and got a position there and didn't seem to get a ton of respect. But when Goodman sold Marvel, he had a handshake deal, supposedly, with Cadence, I believe. I don't know if it was handshake or literal. I don't think it was inked. That Chip would stay on for, I think, 4 years in the position of, what was the title he was supposed to have? Do you remember?
It's like publisher, right?
Publisher, something, assistant publisher, editor-in-chief, something high up that he could do, sit there with his thumb up his ass at his desk and feel important and whatever. And Stan turned on that and let him go within a year, 2 years, I think. Not very long. And just kind of said, don't let the door hit your ass, hit on the ass on the way out, and fired him. And Martin was furious. He took this as a personal slight. He felt he had built Marvel up, and that to be treated that way on his son to be treated that way on his way out was a massive insult. He was a man of no small wealth, and so he formulated a plan. This is several people's perspectives. So, there were some interviews I read in there that were kind of like, it was a factor, but it wasn't. But a lot of people are like, no, this was revenge against Stan Lee and Marvel Comics.
It absolutely was revenge. It fits with his personality. It fits with everything.
So in June of 1974 is when the offices for Atlas opened up. And that's when he started hiring people. He hired a kid who was like 22 at the time who had worked for Warren Magazine. He'd written a few things. He had done some editorial type of work or whatever stuff around the offices of Warren Publishing named Jeff Roven. And they hired him. He's like, again, 22, maybe 23 tops to run this whole line. And just, it's a huge undertaking. And, to hear Jeff tell it, he's one of the people that kind of has the perspective of course, revenge was a factor and a motivating, influence. But also, there was a part of him, or at least me convincing him or convincing myself, that we can also do relevant comics and push the boundaries here a little bit and do something exciting and new. Because, again, the comics code had started to erode or completely fallen away by 74. And underground comics were a big deal. So older readers were reading comics. And there was an opportunity here to do something with some artistic merit, do something new. And so there was another side of Atlas Seaboard that was, let's just put out good comics, treat artists well, and let's make a revolution here. And we'll be dinging Stan. We'll be getting quarters out of kids' hands and doing something good for the world, for society, for culture. So that was a factor. So I feel like there's two halves of this 1 year of Atlas Seaboard's. When Jeff Roven, he was hired in June, he walked by January. And he gives the impression from interviews with him that they were in earnest trying to make good comics. And by the time he left in January, they hadn't even had sales on the first issues back yet. And Martin and Chip and people are just like, all right, let's revamp this, rework this, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you don't even know if people like it yet. Why are you changing it? And it seems to be the edict was, it's not Marvel enough. Make it like Marvel.
Yeah, and that's like, I understand since, Marvel is the most successful comic book company at the time, but it's also like, that just seemed to be his sole focus. It seems like the decisions that Goodman was making are out of spite and are out of revenge. And some of the, a few of the comics seem to be pretty good. And the odd thing that comes out of this giant supposedly spiteful act is that comic creators got their art back. They got paid better. They got these rights that they had been fighting for so much, rights that Martin Goodman did not give them when he was head of Marvel. He would never have given them this. This seems to have been a concession to where he's just like, okay, we wouldn't need to make it more Marvel. We're going to steal every single artist we can directly from Marvel. And I mean, he did, but he had to promise them stuff for them to come over, and he promised them actual creator rights, like some of them owned the characters and took them elsewhere after Atlas folded. They got their art back. So
generous page count increases, or page rate increases. So I think that's the impression I get is that was Jeff Roven's idea, was to, if you really want to do this right, we need to offer these things to the artists. And Martin probably begrudgingly took out his checkbook and was muttering and grumbling under his breath the entire time. But, to me, this felt a lot like when you have like Bernie Sanders in 2016 saying, healthcare for everybody, blah, blah, blah. Everyone freaks out and is like, you can't do that. That's insane. But everyone kind of moves a little bit to that side. So everyone benefits from it. So, and, then you have Biden's kind of, forgiving student loan debt and stuff like that, where it's like, this was not even, you couldn't even talk about this 10 years ago, 8 years ago. So I think it had that effect to where it was normalized. Neil Adams wasn't the one lone voice out there shaking his fist saying, artists are gods. Why are you not treating us better? You had a publisher out here was saying, yeah, you are. And we will come work for us.
Yeah, definitely Jeff is the main voice on that. It seems like, because there's even a quote, I think in the CBA issue, of just like, of Martin Goodman just listening to Neil Adams, just being like, who does this fucking guy think he is? But then he had to do it. He had to do it reluctantly.
So in multiple places in that comic book artist issue, there it's referred to. So I know this is real because it's been multiple sources that "Make Ours Marvel" was their mantra, because "Make Mine Marvel" was Marvel's whole thing, right, for the fandom. And so there's like "Make Ours Marvel," make ours just like Marvel. Take a quarter of it. That kid's going to buy a Hulk comic? No, he's not. He's going to buy the Brute.
and that was their motto in-house, but in the fucking comics, it's the new House of Ideas.
Yeah.
Not subtle in any way.
So this is the issue we're talking about tonight, The Grim Ghost. This is something that was when everything was flush with cash, and it was, let's just hire who we can. Michael Fleisher had been at DC. He'd done the Spectre story that was the backup in Adventure Comics. Is that correct, Jacob? And
That's right.
It was kind of a little bit controversial at the time in the early 70s when it was published, because the Spectre's punishments to the guilty were kind of considered bizarre or cruel. Like he would turn people into inanimate objects and then set them on fire or stuff like that. So Fleischer had a rep of being kind of a cynical, hard-nosed modern writer, right?
Yeah, those Spectre issues are amazing. If you haven't read those, check them out. Bad guys getting cut in half by giant pairs of scissors. Like it's fucking awesome.
There is an omnibus that came out in 2020 that's out of print, but it's being reissued this June. If anybody's interested in getting a Spectre big hardcover, 600 and some pages. Fleischer was a little pissed at DC, the impression I get from multiple people in that book as well. So he was happy to go and freelance for these guys. And then they got, should we transition or should we continue with more history? Okay.
No, I think it's a perfect transition. Yeah, let's transition.
And then they hired an artist named Ernie Colón, who was born in Puerto Rico. He moved to New York City when he was 10 years old and dreamed of being a comic book artist when he was 6 years old. And that's all he's ever really wanted to do, and mostly what he's done his entire life. And so I'm curious, like, what your impressions of Ernie Colón are. I think most people would probably know him from, I'm not sure how you say it, Eric, Son of Thunder, that early 80s DC book.
Yeah, that is, I think, what most people know him from. I've always been a big supporter and booster of Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld.
But I've never read it. I've always heard that's one of those ones like Micronauts, where it's like, don't sleep on this because this was just a little whatever book. Like, this is a great fucking book. I've always heard that about Amethyst.
No, whenever I could pick an issue up off the stands when I was a kid, I would. And this is, back in the early 80s where it's a girl's comic, but it was not. It was great. I would love to reread all of that.
So prior to that though, Ernie was not particularly interested in superheroes at all. He did not care for superhero. He loved adventure comics, different genres of stuff, but he thought superheroes were kind of dorky. The only superhero he seemed to really have liked was Captain Marvel, and that was back in the Fawcett days. He thought by the time DC got a hold of him, they'd already ruined him. He didn't like this grim, like he probably hated the 80s. So he hated the Frank Miller, Wolverine, kind of that whole thing. He thought was ridiculous. He cut his teeth, the majority of his career from the mid 50s through like probably before he came to Seaboard was working for Harvey Comics. He did do some Warren stuff, eerie and creepy, gorgeous work. But he drew Richie Rich and Casper like a motherfucker. And that's the majority of his output.
Yep, Hot Stuff, Casper, like that. He worked for a decade.
I think he said 15 years straight. Like he might leave for a year and then come back and just to get a raise. Like he would go do some work, do some commercial work, some multimedia type of stuff, some advertising stuff, and then come back and be like, if you guys want to give me a raise, I'll come back. And be like, yes, please. Because Richie Rich was always selling more and more comics and they needed more artists. So, Jacob, you know me, I fucking love Harvey Comics. Richie Rich is not my favorite. I love Casper and I love Hot Stuff passionately. Those are a happy place for me. That's like a peppermint tea and a blanket wrapped around me and God rubbing my tummy. I love that stuff. So I'm a huge fan of Ernie Colón. It was exciting to see him branch out and do some stuff like this. It's not horror. That is superhero-y. And this is, after this, he did some more. He went to Star. Is that what the Marvel's younger age imprint was called? He did like New Kids on the Block that Jeff Rovin, the editor, wrote.
I remember Star. It's like Heathcliff and Madballs.
Yep. It was just all the licensed stuff, right? Yeah. So that was like always my last choice as like a 10-year-old. Like if you're at the store and you're like, God damn it, they don't have any Punisher. All right, so I'm reading Madballs this week. So Grim Ghost. So these first handful of issues we're talking about, these hit the stands in November of the first 3 episodes we're talking about this season. Hit the stands of November of '74, and they had a cover date of January. So these are the ones that, in Jeff Rovin's opinion, they were not just about stealing Marvel stuff. There's not an analog, the Brute is the Hulk. Not for everything. Some of these were them trying to make cool stuff. So, and this is one of those ones. So that's why I kind of want to start with this, where it's like, we're not trying to rip off Roy Thomas's Conan. We're not trying to do whatever. Like, I want to start with one that was like, say, first month of publishing, and was them trying to do something new.
Yeah, I think the only comparison that I could think of Marvel is it's almost like they took both versions of Ghost Rider and put it together a little bit and gave it a different backstory. But no, it's not as obvious of a ripoff as the Tarantula or, any of the other ones that we're going to be talking about. No, Grim Ghost is unique in an Atlas.
There's also a little Son of Satan in it. Just in the being an agent of the underworld and dealing with stuff and kind of, being able to pass between worlds and stuff like that. It was, interesting stuff. So, one last note before we dive into this issue. We do need to drink the Urgle Nurgle, but it is January and I'm doing a dry January. So, whenever February hits, we will have that cocktail that was sent to us last season to celebrate Lucky, the Frankenstein monster.
So, gosh, do any of our drinking rules carry over, Matt?
Yes. If anyone's new, we typically have drinking rules. Even though I'm having an NA beer, I'm going to open that NA hazy right now.
I am having a Ramita alteration.
I have a Ramita alteration. So some of our famous drinks carry over, I guess. Obviously the Werewolf by Night ones were whenever it was a full moon and Jack forgot and turned into a werewolf. That was a drink. Whenever he was driving a car and turned into a werewolf, or a motorcycle or anything, we do that. Whenever there's a judo flip or kung fu, we would do that. Anytime somebody saw the werewolf and would think he was a guy in a mask, we always had a drink for that one, mistaking someone for wearing a mask. And then we kind of evolved to different stuff. I think during last season, Creature Commandos, whenever a Nazi got killed, we'd drink for that happily. Yeah, whenever a new power is introduced at random, just without any kind of preface, that's a drink. I'm trying to think what else there is.
I don't know. Like none of these are gonna fit. We're gonna have to,
There's one in here.
We're gonna have to come up with some new ones. I can see one
applying. Yeah.
Is there?
Okay. So, shall we dive in?
Yeah, let's dive in. Absolutely.
So, yeah, we're looking at Grim Ghost number 1. We do need to thank our patron saint, though. We received some care packages in the mail from our friend Jackson T. Overstreet, who has been a supporter of the show from, I think, day one. And he sent Jacob and I basically complete sets of everything that Atlas Seaboard published. And so we have all of the comics. I mean, it's a stack this big. The magazines, it is crazy. And we can't thank Jackson enough. It's on our YouTube channel. I did an unboxing of me opening it up and just kind of losing my mind that this happened. And Jacob, why don't you mention your cool little project there?
Yeah, so back there, there was a magazine rack that was sitting. I work at the library in Klamath Falls. There was a magazine rack sitting in our garage that had a sign on it that said "Scrap Metal," and it was a magazine rack from a real rural branch. I think it was the Gilchrist branch here in Southern Oregon. And my wife saw something in it. I was just like, "Is this anything?" And she's like, "Bring that home. We're gonna fix that." And so we went to the hardware store, got new poles. She carefully, redid the sign. It was a magazine rack for these books that Sunset Magazine did in the 60s that were like how to fix this. And so, so we ended up fixing it up. She made a sign so it says it's Atlas comic book time. And one of the last things that it's just like happy family. Hopefully we'll show a picture of this happy family. And the last thing that this says is like, do a better job. And so I thought that was perfect for a lot of the Atlas Seaboard. Because we'll probably be yelling that a little bit coming into some of these issues.
It's a very distinct possibility. Might be.
But yes, if you're just if you haven't listened to any of our previous seasons, Matt and I, we give fair criticism, but we do not shit on stuff. We really try and find the positive. We aren't those comic guys that are just gonna, actually your ear off and be dicks about it. So for the most part, we try and find the joy in the goofiness of 70s comics. So not a ton of negativity in our lineup.
I think we call them as we see them, but I don't dump on a lot of stuff except Rob Liefeld is something I'm happy to shit on, and Ethan Van Sciver. But also if you're
and Nazis.
So if those are hot takes for you, this might not be your show. But we occasionally talk about politics and stuff like that. But we're flaming liberals, and if that's something that might be a problem, sorry, but that's how it is. Okay, so Grim Ghost number 1. This cover was completely done by Ernie Colón, and what a gorgeous start to this line of books, man. Also, folks, if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching. We appreciate that. Please like and subscribe and do all the stuff. Leave a comment. We love to hear what you think about Atlas Comics, your experience with them, anything like that. But we also are publishing this in parallel as audio. So sometimes we'll be explaining things you can see. And the reason that's happening is because people do like to listen while they do things like carry mail and do whatever else people do while they listen to podcasts. So, hi, Jared. We have a beautiful cover here. And it's a black background. And we have a giant devil swooping in from the background. Absolutely amazing. I love that he looks more inhuman than a typical devil does in the late 60s, early 70s in like mainstream comics. It's not just a naked dude painted red with like some horns taped on his head. Like he looks demonic and scary. And he's swooping in. He has long, creepy claws, like 3-inch, long nails. And we have our hero, air quotes, he is riding on a horse. He's holding 2 old pistols, colonial era pistols, and running away from the devil through the air, shooting back towards him. And we have flames coming up from below. And Jacob, I love all of the souls and the flames that are coming up. They're white hot. The flames have white, orange, and yellow as they're kind of different varying degrees of heat. And these souls look horrified. Like, they look to me really twisted, like Ted McKeever meets Bill Sienkiewicz, like just like that dude with like the hairy chest hair, and he's just like this fat balding guy, and like they just look like schmucks who went to hell and they're suffering horribly. Yep. So what I really love about this is this kind of gradient from upper left to bottom right, where it goes black from like the brimstone of the the caves of hell down to the white hot heat, and you have in the center this beautiful thing of the encroaching Satan and our titular character. So for me, my eye just keeps going left to right, top to bottom, and it's just this pleasure loop. What'd you think of this?
Oh, it's amazing. Like, think if you saw this on the stands. Yeah. Like, wouldn't your just little kid mind just blow the fuck apart? Like, it's so cool. And yeah, it's a pretty grim cover for color comics. Like, a lot of this shit would be, would fly in the black and white mags, but yeah, and I think Jeff Rovin talked a lot about, the Code's power was waning, but they seem to have fought over every issue of Atlas with the Code, and there's reasons why. I mean, we'll see a couple in this issue, to where you're just like, oh wow, that's in a color comic. Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
I think
and so
this has the comics code on it, but they did push the envelope a little bit. There's some dams that was still a big deal, in a color drugstore comic. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
So you couldn't start better, in my opinion. I love, by the way, the masthead or whatever, like the logo for the Grim Ghost. Just pretty straight, the Grim, and then the Ghost is what you would expect, a phantom, baby blue phantom characters. So, yeah. Shall we?
Let's do it. Okay, so, the title of our story is Enter the Grim Ghost. And we already talked about our duo of creators. And, so GCD listed, so there's no color or letter credits on these, or in GCD. I don't know, maybe as we go on and we read, maybe they'll be more credited. I don't know, though. I don't think Goodman was super into crediting colorists or letterers.
I know that Ernie did his own lettering and Martin hated it.
Well, Ernie said that he was a shitty letterer. Like, Ernie was just like, I'm bad at this. Like, I don't like this. So from digging that I did, it's most likely Shelley Lefferman, probably, who was doing the lettering. He was the production manager for the first few months and did lettering. So that's my guess.
Okay, I might have misremembered that. I thought Ernie said that he actually lettered these first two issues.
Did he? Oh, maybe he did. But so I don't know. I mean, he's credited on GCD, but there's a question mark on a lot of these. So but kind of a crazy splash page, which I just fucking loved. So it's the opening narration. From out of the moonlit night he rides, mounted astride a jet black steed with his identity concealed by a garish mask. Who is the rider, and where does he come from? Is he a force for good or harbinger of evil? And if he is evil, who is there to stop him? And so, we have this awesome Grim Ghost on a horse, bearing down on a group of crooks who are trying to rob a fur warehouse. A fur heist, Matt. This is simpler times, right?
That was my first thought, too. Was like, wow, this feels old-fashioned. It's very like 50s.
I love it. So it's the two guys saying, "Good Lord, what's that?" And that laugh, it ain't human. It's like something straight from hell. But then we get my favorite character, of course, and this Goldie. Well, don't just stand there gaping at him, you idiots. Gun him down. And Goldie's always got two guns and is awesome. So it's a hell of an opening page.
I love this perspective of being up in the sky, looking down as our ghost character like swoops in from the sky. I mean, everything about this is exciting to me. Plus his laugh, like immediately, like, it sounds like The Shadow meets Vincent Price in Thriller. Like it's echoey and creepy and makes your skin crawl. Good stuff. All right. So on the next page, so that was like, by the way, we never really have a name for this, but that's like what we always say. This is like on the Rockford Files, when you get a little peek before the episode starts, kind of a little montage of like, here's what's coming this week, folks. Because we jump back in time a little bit here on the next page to this actual heist. So it's nighttime in the city, and then we get this nice little escape up here on the top. I love some of the little touches that Ernie does that I don't think a typical superhero comics artist would have done, like that little cityscape at the top, just to kind of set the scene where that would normally just be text. I love stuff like that. And Goldie's telling these guys to get moving. They haven't done it all night. And they're like, hey, come on, we got 12 minutes before the Watchman comes. I love this. She has like a rat face. Goldie's obviously hot because she's cold. She's a femme fatale. So she has to be gorgeous. And both of these dudes look like they're ripped out of the 50s as well, right? Fedora, big wide tie like that. And the other dude's got like the newsy cap with like a rat face.
It's corny old fashioned for sure.
And then so they're assured that they have 12 minutes, and then of course the security guard walks in and he's like, hey, stop where you are, you're under arrest, huh? And then this bottom panel here, I love this. Like, you see Goldie in the foreground screwing on the silencer onto her gun, just grinning with this evil look, while the old grandpa Pep is there. He can't quite retire just yet. He's probably a week away from retirement with a full pension. He's like, get those hands up. I'm going to call the police. And then I love his little editorializing, like, not that it'll do any good, I suppose. Bums like you always get a mealy-mouthed lawyer who... Love him. Like, look at that. The guy with the fedora has, like, are those spats? Like, what the hell is going on with this time period?
Yeah, spats. He's probably got sock garters on. Like, yeah, it's weird. It is definitely weird. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, next page we get Goldie takes out the guard with a couple of shots from her silencer. I like it. Which I think, yeah, I love the sound effect on that. So he goes down. The boys are just laughing because they're monsters, saying, and yeah, kind of gruesome. I didn't like the way that guy looks. That's sad.
Yeah, so she shot him in the back. I mean, that's, like, if we didn't know already that she's rotten, like, not even a word, just not even a hey, nothing, just bam, bam.
Yeah, nope. Yeah, so, yeah, the guys are just like, oh, it's about time. What took you so long? Okay, I just like, she can crack wise. She's like, I'm just a girl, Griff. I always have trouble getting on my silencer. And so I like it. They're like, you got a great sense of humor, Goldie. But then, yeah, and it's, again, reminding us why we're here. She's like, now, come on, let's grab those furs and get out of here. Which it made me think, like, on the final panel, she's just like, you guys are supposed to be strong. Can't you load those furs any faster? I'm just like, all right, furs aren't light, Sure. That's, but yeah. So they're trying to get all those furs away. But yeah, one of the fellas is like, good grief, look. And that bottom panel, I love the lone, like, spotlight, yes, just like on the old guard. It almost looked like they're like moths up by the bulb a little bit.
Those are totally moths.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that was a really cool twist there.
That. Yeah. So Colón here, once I realized he was a Harvey guy, like, this didn't surprise me that much. Like the variety of his style here, like these cartoonish, like this guy pointing up here in the previous panel, the kind of rat face dude. He's a cartoonist. He's not just a comics guy, right? Like, I think he's a proper cartoonist and he can draw anything, but you definitely see, like, he gets very expressive and a little loose with it, like the way he does things, where, you might expect like a Wally Wood or somebody to do something kind of more hard-boiled, a little more realistic and grounded. This feels more fluid and just like a little more playful to me.
Yeah, I mean, that Harvey background's really coming through. You're right. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
And, you can tell that he did some stuff at Erie, though, because that grandpa getting plugged, that's horrifying.
Mm-hmm. It is horrifying, right? There's something just about the stance and just how it looks like the shots actually, like, lifted him off his feet, like but it's all like arms and legs akimbo in a freaky way. Yeah, no, I couldn't figure out what was unsettling about that, but it was.
It's the surprise in his eyes, and like you're saying, his physical attitude, like where he's being like lifted and like thrown, where it's just, It's unsettling. And then Ratso, I'm just calling him Ratso because we know it's Griff and somebody. I call him Ratso. Like, he's just kind of turning his head away from the shots and just laughing. Like, he doesn't want to get blood splattered on his face. Like, it's grim. So what Griff saw was our titular character. For a chilling moment, the murderous fur thieves freeze in terror as a fearsome apparition of doom thunders out of the moonlit sky, laughing like a demon from the darkest pits of hell. And Ratso laughs. Griff's like, what is it? And so he lands on the ground, dismounts, and Goldie says, who gives a damn what it is? Gun him down. She's got 2 guns. She has a silencer still on one, and then the other one doesn't have a silencer, so she's going bam, wham, and fwit.
It's my favorite part of the whole issue right there.
I love that she's so hard-boiled. And so she just pulled that second gun out of her purse and just dropped it and just started opening fire on this guy. And then at the bottom here, we get the first kind of sense that something is not natural. Then we get some writing here from Fleisher that's kind of very evocative. He says, now the darkened street echoes with the spang of gunfire and the clatter of cartridge casings against the pavement. And then suddenly the gunmen drop their guns and scream in tortured agony as a weird mist begins to whirl around them. And I love that too. Like, that's also very horror comics, right? Like, something's going wrong and they're just screaming in fear. I love when the bad guy gets scared. That's always very pleasurable for me because I'm small and powerless.
Yeah, no, you're right. But he kind of is going back and forth from a very kind of cartoonist approach to it. That bottom panel, that could have been out of one of the black and white magazines. Like, it's horrifying. It's really, really cool. So next page, and suddenly, the 2 Palookas have disappeared. So Goldie's like, they're gone. And then we hear from the Grim Ghost, to a far more exciting place, I assure you. She asks what he's done with them. Who are you? Says he's Matthew Dunsinane, my good lady, or rather, I was. And she's like, was? What do you take me for? Some kind of idiot? Who are you working for anyway? The law. But then I love that he takes her hand and kisses it like a gentleman. He's like, but madam offends me. I can assure you whatever humble powers I possess derive from a decidedly opposite source. Like, she's, is that so? Well, I'm going to have to cut it this short, Matthew, baby. The Late Show's on TV, and I wouldn't want to miss it. She's got her guns again. One silenced, one
like
not.
The Shadow.
And opens fire. Yeah. God. Oh, God. So funny.
Yeah, man. I mean, we got our first proper look at this character. We've only seen him from the side or from the back, and then we get this. I mean, the design is amazing. I kind of want the Mego figure now that I've seen him and read him. Like, I just... The mask like that and the full on old school with the riding boots and the 2 pistols. God, he looks great. And I love these panels here at the bottom, like that interesting choice to push in super close on him and his eyes, even though you can't see his irises or his pupils, but it's still just kind of pushing in tight, and she's in the background just getting ready to do her Goldie thing. Good stuff. So, Jacob, I would consider this maybe a nebulous power that just all of a sudden kind of asserts itself. Her guns start shooting roses.
How cool is that?
It's pretty weird.
That's also a bit of a Spectre type of thing that would happen for sure. So Fleischer's definitely doing his Fleischer thing.
He can transmute matter, apparently. He turns bullets into roses. And he says they're long-stemmed roses, to be exact. A lovely bouquet for a most lovely lady. And then there's this odd little spotlight on them that Colón does as he takes them out of the gun and hands them to her in a bunch. Please accept them with my compliments. My only regret is, where I must send you, they are somewhat likely to get singed. And she's gone. So the 3 furrier thieves, are gone, and his work here is done, and we get a beautiful big panel of him saddling up on his black steed and riding off. And once again, the street is silent, save for the momentary clatter of hoofbeats, the proud whinny of a black steed, and the hollow echo of demonic laughter. I just really wanted to have sound effects for the laughing for this whole thing. It was driving me nuts. I didn't get to hear it.
God, those 2 panels. I love how Colón has, there's a light behind the roses. It's like, and there's all these lines going to what is happening, the transmutation. And then, and then, like you said, there's a spotlight when they actually become roses, and he gives it to her. There's these cool little touches that are they're really, really effective.
Oh yeah, fun. It's kind of nice, right? Like it's like a sunburst of it, them coming into being, and then like they focus when they become a bouquet and get handed to her. Like just a cool cartoonist touch. Like he's really good at this.
No, he is really, really good. Okay, origin time. We get okay, so let's read the narration. The narration is who is the costumed horseman on the jet black steed? What is the nature of his unearthly mission? For answers, we must return to colonial America in the year 1743, as a horse-drawn carriage wheels briskly towards a bend in the moonlit road. And then we were open on a coach that is being piloted by a Jeremy, and who we'll find out later, a Lord Braddock, is saying, "Faster, Jeremy! I've heard these roads are filled with highwaymen." He says, "Yes, your lordship." And then, a highwayman does show up, looking like the grim ghost that we met in the future, who's laughing. Obviously, like you said, very evil. I do wish we could hear it too. But and then at the bottom we see that he says, the Lord Bracken says, like, Jeremy, who is that laughing? Why have we stopped? And there's a great panel of the ghost, pointing his gun at a funny name. I don't know why Jeremy is a funny name for this time period, right? I know it was around, but it's still funny.
It's just funny to me no matter what the time period is, and it's just probably because of Yellow Submarine. Like it will always be a funny. I always laugh when I hear that name. No offense to any Jeremys out there. Sorry.
Yeah. No, not at all.
I love this panel here. Gorgeous stuff.
Yeah, really.
And I would think that, Colón would probably love drawing, getting the reference books and drawing all the carriages and stuff like that and all the guns. I mean, that would be an ace assignment for me if I was an artist and I could actually draw something. I would love to look at all the old stuff like that and do the hats, like the tri-corner hats and all that jazz. Yeah. So, on the next page, he approaches the carriage and opens it up, and Braddock says, "It's a highwayman." And then there's a military guy in there. He says, "Not just any highwayman, my lord. You're new in these parts, or you'd know that this is the blackguard they call the Grim Ghost." And so the woman in the carriage is into it, like immediately. And Grim Ghost kissed her hand. She's like, "Well, I don't think he's grim at all. I think he's rather charming and no doubt handsome beneath that mask." He says, "Visions of loveliness like yourself who make a life of banditry so appealing." And then he just turns and goes, bam, and just kills the military guy without a word. So stubborn fools like the major here who make highway robbery so deadly, because the guy was pulling a pistol out of his coat. And then we get a really kind of grim, again, like we were saying, just the tonal shifts from Colón. On the bottom left here, like we see the dead major. And he looks creepy, just those glazed eyes, just looking up lifelessly. And he's already, he's in moonlight. So there's obviously no light. So he just looks already like blue and because of the effect of the ambient light. But he says, Grim Ghost says, "You needn't trouble yourself about his condition, milady. He's quite dead, I assure you. The Grim Ghost, if I may say so, is a perfect marksman." And then he says, "The gentleman's wallet is fat, of that I'm certain, but 'tis the lady's brooch I really came for," as he yanks her brooch off of her neck. Startles her. So it's hard not to like a playful thief, even though he's a bastard person, obviously. They're just so charming.
He is. He's a gentleman rogue.
Even though he just murdered a guy. And self-defense.
Even though he just murdered a guy. Yeah, kind of. It was the major was almost going to do something. He hadn't moved out of his seat yet, but he was going to do something. So then I love this. So the ghost, as he leans in for the kiss, he takes his other hand and like pushes Lord Braddock away, just like kind of mashes his face. And And it's just like, Milady's scent is as sweet as the Garden of Eden. I only regret that my mask must stand between me and your full, lush, ruby lips. And then she says, but she is into it. And says, then perhaps you will arrange to rob me on another occasion, Mr. Ghost. I can easily arrange to take the carriage out at night without my husband. Then inside we hear Braddock say, Sarah, for God's sake.
You know she's a handful.
Oh, man. Yeah, she is. But then, of course, says, moments later, amid a clatter of hoofbeats, the grim ghost vanishes into the nighttime stillness. Ha, 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 ha. And yeah, he rides off. I love that middle panel. It looks so cool. I love the composition.
Perfection.
Then bottom, and within seconds, which I think is interesting. Seconds suddenly. So what are these soldiers, like guards around proto cops in a way?
I thought these were British. I thought it was like the colonies. I thought it was like the British military. Who was kind of doubling as cops, right?
Yeah. So these are the soldiers, and so they show up saying, "Lord Braddock, we were patrolling the road, sir, and heard a shot. What's happened?" Lord Braddock said, "We've been waylaid by a highwayman. Major Duncan has been shot dead." And you see Major Duncan's foot sticking out of the carriage.
It's grim.
It is.
Yeah, I love all the detail here, and it's just funny Sarah's married to this guy who looks like Baron Harkonnen, so of course she's going to be flirting with some dashing bandit, even though she can't even see what he looks like. Something exciting.
Yep.
So on the next page, Braddock has said he's gone that way. They say it was a grim ghost, I'll wager. This road's his favorite robbing ground. He has a head start, but perhaps we can catch him. Not bloody likely. Not if it's really the grim ghost we're after. So the men go chasing off after him, and then they immediately come across a dapper young man there with a big old pipe. And like, hey, halt there in the name of name of His Majesty. He's like, whoa, hey guys. Just me. What are you guys doing out here? Is it a late night fox hunt or something like that? I'm like, oh, it's you, Mr. Dunsinane. You shouldn't make a habit of being abroad after dark, sir, not with a grim ghost about. And he's like, did he pass this way? He's like, no, I can't say I've seen him. Are you quite certain he passed this way? Just look at him, his hand on his hip. He's all jaunty with his 2-foot-long pipe.
Yeah, his rakish grin. Rakish grin. Yeah, he's not on the level, as they'd say.
That's just a pipe, though. It doesn't represent anything else. Don't worry.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, then the soldiers are. Well, he had a pretty good start on us. You see, they're just like, well, he could have turned off the road almost anywhere. Well, it says it's not the first time that brigand's given us the slip. That's for certain. So, as we'll find out later, this has been going on for a long time. And so they bid goodnight to Mr. Dunsinane, and then the following morning at the Braddock house, you're right, he is Baron Harkonnen, basically. And he says, I tell you, I want this grim ghost person apprehended. What kind of country is this when a man can't even... And then I like the guy is just like looking away from him, just being like, we're trying, Lord Braddock. Believe me, we're trying. What can we do? We don't even know who the man is. No one's ever seen him without his mask. And then, he gets up saying, they don't call him the Grim Ghost for nothing. He hits like lightning, then vanishes like a puff of smoke. And Sarah speaks up, saying, I bet I can catch the Grim Ghost for you. And he says, you can? How? And then as she takes her coat off, saying, simple, my darling husband, the same way a woman always catches a man. And quite revealing for a comic.
She was a little racy in this issue.
Yeah, she is racy in this issue for sure.
That guy they're talking to, what is with his face?
I don't know. It's like he has
pox maybe? Or something. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I love that wanted poster for the Grim Ghost behind him.
Oh yeah, me too. Right? So cool.
That's so awesome. These faces, like that. The dude's face down here on the left, like it's very Mad Magazine. Like again, Colón can do no wrong here. He just can do all these different styles. I love it, and he can draw a pretty lady. Okay,
he can.
So the trap has been set. We get a little look at this here. So several nights later at Lord Braddock's mansion, and Matthew Dunstan has shown up for the party. Everyone's there. It's a big deal. And he says, I didn't quite get this joke, as maybe I'm just overthinking it. Braddock says, Major Tunney tells me you're in the firearms business. And he says, that I am, Lord Braddock, but business is so poor these days that I'm afraid I've become my own best customer. Is that a joke?
I didn't, maybe not one that I got, or maybe not a funny one. I didn't know
if there was like, some layer that I was missing. So Braddock introduces Sarah to him, and he's quite charmed. He says, you look exquisite. And she asks if they want to dance, and he says, hell yeah, I could dance on the ceiling. And she says, I get the feeling like we've met before. Is that possible? And he's like, I wish it were, Lady Braddock, for then we would be friends instead of merely beginning our acquaintance. So he's turning the charm up to 11.
Yeah, he is. A lot of whoever's doing the coloring, the shadows on the faces in this issue are not great.
Little heavy.
Little heavy. We noticed that on one of the crooks in the first sequence. So, But okay, well, yeah. Let's go to the next page. It says several hours later, and Lady Braddock is tired from all that formal dancing, and goes up to bed. And she, I like it. She undoes her corset all by herself. Nope. She doesn't need Clara. It's like, I'll manage by myself tonight. Thank you, Clara. But you can imagine, like, she's curt. She's not nice with Clara. Yeah. And so, And again, the panels are pretty racy for a code-approved color comic.
Definitely.
And then, So then moments later, it says... And the Grim Ghost arrives, says, but you are lovely, Lady Braddock. I dare say the prize I will enjoy this fine night shall be worth every bit of the risk I've taken to collect it. She says, oh.
We get to see her in her nightie, like with the moonlight coming through the window. So it's pretty revealing. This is pretty racy.
It is pretty revealing. Yeah, I'm sure they got some, they got in some hot water because of this.
From those
goons. Definitely. It's funny though, in 74, I wonder if it was just you guys are going to be in trouble, but then they're like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
I wonder if it was to that point.
Yeah, I think it was probably kind of getting there, huh?
It's probably getting there.
I would think almost at this point, what is the benefit of even having the code on your cover? Were there parents who were still freaked out from the 50s and were just like, okay, just want to make sure that funny book you got had the code on it. Don't want any zombies in there.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, honestly, though it did stick around for a while, by this point, it's obsolete. Wortham isn't raising a stink anymore.
Okay. So on the next page, they continue this little repartee here. He says, well, you did invite me to come rob you again, milady, and the grim ghost is never one to reject an invitation to such exquisite larceny. And he's brought the brooch back, and he says, only this time I'd hope that instead of taking something from you, we could perhaps arrange a form of trade. So he's suggesting he give his brooch back if they get down, right? Okay.
Yeah,
just making sure I wasn't reading into it too much.
No, you're not. You're not reading into it enough.
And she says, wow, you are indeed a captivating man. And then I love this panel from the middle here. She's amazing. Her face from Colón. She says, I admire your boldness and your quick wit. This time, however, I fear you have been outwitted. Seize him! What? He looks awesome as he's whipping his head around in surprise. Sure enough, this whole thing was a honeypot trap. And quickly summon my husband, tell him I have captured his mysterious grim ghost, and that I'll expect those diamond earrings I've admired as a suitable reward. Yes, milady. So she just wanted something she had her eyes on. So now her husband has to buy it for her. And again, he doesn't look too freaked out. He just kind of looks like, no, I'll get my way out of this one. I've gotten out of, you get a sense that, like you said, he's been around doing this for a while. He has quite a body count, and he seemed like he's kind of like, I'll get my way out of this one. I always do.
That is, and that's demonstrated just by his posture, which is cool. That's shows how great Colón is. Yeah, absolute good comicking. So yeah, next page, Vladimir comes in and he says, well done, Sarah. Now let's see who our grim ghost is behind his scarecrow's mask. And then he unmasks him. Well, it's Mr. Dunsinane. And then, man, Sarah gets the best line of the whole comic, to where she says, a pity, in a single night I lose 2 handsome men. Like,
Jacob,
all right.
I'm starting to suspect that might just have a marriage of convenience.
You know, you probably are right. You mentioned it before, but now I'm really in. All right, we move straight to trial. The judge said, and for your nefarious crimes on the public highways, I hereby sentence you to be hanged by the neck until you are dead. And then immediately next panel. This is a quick trial and hanging, which I like. They have more exciting stuff to get to. So then, it says justice was swift in King George's America on August 23rd, 1743, just 3 weeks following his capture. Final sentence was carried out on Matthew Dunsinane, alias the Grim Ghost. He's on the gallows. You'll see the fellows are yelling at him, so long, Grim Ghost. You're about to become a real ghost now. But then, you know what? I think Dunsinane actually gets the best line of the issue. Because he says, as the noose is getting put around his neck, he says, don't waste your breath yelling at me, my good men. Use it to comfort your pretty wives who will be love-starved without me.
Oh, man. Yeah, like you said, this moves really fast. Like, this is super economical storytelling. I wonder if it would be not most likely the Marvel method, right? This would be more traditional scripting from Fleisher, describing the panels, right? And like with full dialogue.
That's an interesting thing, and I don't know if maybe when we read and talk more about artist interviews, they'll give us a little insight into that. But it would be, I mean, I would think not, but would Goodman go even that far and just be like, nope, got to use the Marvel method?
I'm curious. I don't think he cared.
Yeah,
it seemed like he never I got the impression from that Roven interview. He's like, he didn't want to see the art. He wanted to see the finished thing before it went out the door. Like, he didn't care about process. He just wanted to see what was going to go out the door. So he probably didn't give a rat's ass. Probably my favorite page of the issue here, which is going to marvel at here. It's full 4-panel layout, but the trapdoor opens on the gallows and he drops down. There's a hideous gurgle, but then he continues falling, and he falls through what seems like an eternity, and longer than any mind can imagine. That's eternity. And then we get this beautiful 2-panel weird thing here. He says, I'm not dead, I'm alive. Somehow, even though they hanged me, I didn't die. And we see these horrifying demons whipping a guy with manacles on. And they look like horse donkey things. And I mean, they're just grotesque and horrifying. In the bottom panel, there's another demon doing the same thing to, I think, a woman, who they're all just writhing in a lake of fire, all that stuff. And we get a really cool depiction of Dunsinane in the foreground, looking at this, just marveling at the horrors he's seeing. And then a red hand, clawed hand, goes out and puts his hand on his shoulder and says, oh, don't be ridiculous, Matthew Dunsinane. Of course you died. What else would you be doing in my domain? And Dunsinane's expression as the devil's hand is on his shoulder is amazing.
Yeah, this whole page is great. I love just the how you see his descent from starting when the gallows, when he gets dropped through, then he's dropped, then he goes further. But yeah, okay, the donkey whatever demons, like flaying a naked man, like that's right out of eerie or creepy. Like that's brutal.
They're like,
we didn't see anything like that in Son of Satan.
Like, these are like donkey pigs. I'm surprised that the code let them do this as well. Like, it's not that it's particularly hyper violent, just there's clearly nude souls and they're clearly being tortured. I mean, it's just pushing everything you can get away with, right?
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. But yeah, what a great page. It looks gorgeous. But then yeah, we get the big reveal, which turns around, Satan. But I never thought. Then Satan, who yeah, looks pretty awesome, like you say. He still is just a pretty buff dude with some horns. Maybe not as cool looking as he is on the cover, but he's got the goat legs. He gets pretty classic.
Like John
here,
Oliver
right?
would get horny for him. You know how he gets like horny about weird things?
Yes. He does. Yeah, I would think that's actually a really good description. Yeah, he says, your kind never do, Dunsinane, until it's far too late. It's rather a pity they caught you, actually. I rather enjoyed your career while it lasted. 18 men shot to death, 67 carriages waylaid. For a while there, you were doing quite well. But allowing yourself to be betrayed by a beautiful woman? Really, Dunsinane, how awfully banal. And Dunsinane's just freaking out. He says, well, what's going to happen to me now? And then, yeah, I did like this narration at the bottom. Again, these things are horrifying. These hairy donkey men, but they're just, they're like donkey boar men. You're right. It says Matthew Dunsinane trembled as he asked his question. In the distance, he could hear the tortured screaming of already fallen souls, doomed to writhe in torment throughout all creation. So he did not need to hear Satan's answer. He knew what that answer was. Then the devil says, why, you're going to suffer the tortures of perdition till the end of time, Matthew Dunsinane.
I'm in love with all of this hell sequence, the art.
Yeah, it's brutal and it's brilliant.
I couldn't help but think of Satan here. I was thinking of Adam Scott and Step Brothers. I haven't had a carb since 2004. BC.
Yeah.
And look at the devil's eyes. God, and that close up on him, they're horrifying. They're like goat's horrifying eyes, but they're all like constricted because it's
like two little candles in them. Yeah, crazy. It's terrifying.
So, he continues, explains the deal here. He says, if you want to make a deal, and he's like, what kind of deal? Look at those fucking things looming over Matthew Dunsinane's shoulder. Horrifying. He says, you have style, my boy. I like style. Most of what the people we get down here are rather on the crude side. I might be persuaded to let you go back if you'd agree to do some work for me. Great panels, extreme close-ups on the two figures that are important here. And Matthew says, well, what kind of work? Why, the devil's work, my boy, devil's work. You could even wear that fancy costume of yours. I always thought it looked quite dashing, of course. Of course, we'd have to get you on a better horse than that old nag you used to ride. And the devil's like already moved on and gone back to torturing people. Like he's working while talking because it's a working meeting. And
he says,
it's really quite simple, Matthew. I want you to keep me supplied with souls for my domain. My demon torturers hardly have enough on hand to keep them busy. And you have this really cool panel of like these stairs going down, and the devil's like shadows being cast up by the flames. And he's like, so Matthew says, you mean, and he says, I'm afraid you'll have to confine your killing to evil people, however. That's one of the stipulations in a regrettable deal I made some time ago. God. And he says, and you'll have to stay dead, of course. Even the devil can't change everything. An odd little porthole kind of close up of the devil. Like, I love that choice. It's so weird.
Yeah. Yeah, what a great page. And yeah, you're right. That's what I thought of too. It's like this is a work meeting, He's still he's still doing stuff. He's still whipping. People are still being tortured for eternity. But I really especially liked the two eyes meeting in that second panel.
Yeah. Walk with me.
Walk with me. All right, next panel, it continues. Devil's like, you'll really be the grim ghost when I get through with you. I'll even let you use a few of my special tricks to see that the job stays interesting. What do you say? I feel like he should say, what say you? Should. But says, all right, I'll do it. Anything to escape being trapped here forever. And the first person I kill when I go back in will be that blasted female who turned me in. And then I like that. Nope, that's not what's going to happen. It says, afraid not, Matthew. You see, I'm not sending you back to your time. I'm sending you to the 20th century. Lots of evil happening there. Makes the era you come from look like a Sunday school picnic. Ha ha ha. Such an awesome panel.
So good.
The devil disappears into just this like red and yellow foom. And then it's just this beautiful, so much negative space. I love the negative space of his cloak. Like, the whole panel is just fucking awesome. But then the next panel is also fucking awesome. With him just kind of like traveling through time. This is the time travel panel. It says, Satan's demonic laughter was still ringing in Matthew Dunsinaine's ears as a hellish whirlwind seized him in its grip and sent him spinning through the vastness of time and space.
Blacklight poster. That's a drink we also do.
Right? Oh,
that should be a
blacklight
poster on our 70s dorm room walls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it should.
Man, quite easily my favorite page of this issue.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's
and I'm
gorgeous.
assuming Foom is just a coincidence. It's not a Friends of Old Marvel kind of a wink wink. You never know.
You never know.
I love this as kind of Doctor Strange, right? Like kind of like particularly like the 1968 Doctor Strange when he had a mask on. He's flying through eternity.
Yep.
Okay, so we get to the last page here. So Matthew Dunsinane has arrived. He's kind of confused. He's like, that's my house. And it looks just like it did when they took me to be hung. Like, has the devil really sent me to a different era? And then he walks in. He's like, it's true. The furnishings, the decorations, it's as if they've lain untouched for hundreds of years. He's walking around. He goes back to the stable behind the house, and he finds a jet black steed. That was the upgrade the devil promised him. And then it says, now you know why, when the night is dark and the moon is full and gray clouds scud lazily across the sky, the ghost of Matthew Dunsinane, the grim ghost, rides forth from his manor house to provide lost souls for purgatory and keep his pact with Satan. Watch for him in the next issue of The Grim Ghost, on sale in January. So there we go.
Love that little porthole at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that
issue
moon with the weird kind of coloring on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So before we dive into something else here, just my only thought when I first read this, I read this a few times, which is kind of like, man, I hate when the origin kind of takes over the first issue because we're not going to officially read anymore. So, like this whole thing is setting up what's going to come next. There were only 3 issues, but so that was kind of weird for me, just because we did have to get to how he got to where he is. I was excited to see what happens when the status quo was established. So we can talk about that after final thoughts, maybe.
Yeah.
But first, I thought we could move on to do some shout outs. So we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/Bronze Age Monsters, and there's several tiers of support that you can do to support us there if you want. There's lots of them, but the most popular one is the Pack member. That's $5 a month. They get the weekly bonus show that we do every other week, so this is a bi-weekly show. And on those off weeks, we have the Shadow Show, and that's a completely separate show, much like this one, but not doing Atlas Seaboard. We're doing just different random Bronze Age stuff throughout the year. And we have a great time doing that. So they get the weekly bonus show in audio or video format, whichever they prefer. They get access to the entire archive. We just published our 106th episode, which was looking at Atlas Seaboard's Gothic Romances magazine. And so they also get access to some gated content that no tiers below that actually have access to. So it's kind of a big deal. And they also get shout-out credits in the bonus show and shout-outs in the Shadow Show as well. So that is people like Benjamin Potter.
Blake, last name withheld.
And Brad Elmore.
Brian Steed.
Brian from Marvel by the Month.
Brink.
Caleb.
Chris Sperry.
Dave Kennedy.
David D.
David Goodwin.
Glenn Lash.
Greg Rowland.
James Shagus.
Jared from the Swords and Scrolls podcast.
Jason Finestone.
Jason W.
Jeff Fitzpatrick.
Jerry from Buffalo.
Justin the Owl.
Letty.
Matt Harvey.
Michelle from Moonlit Comics.
Pat Svek.
Rob from Marvel by the Month,
Russ from Tomes of Evil,
Tony Iupi,
Tim Tucker,
and Worm Drive Pro. There is, however, another tier, Jacob. Do you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, definitely. So there's one more tier on our Patreon, and that is for our star gods, celestial barbarian deities. Enjoy even more perks and exclusive things that we'll make for them on Patreon than any of the previous tiers. And these are patrons like Ben M.,
Eric Hadley,
Jesse McFerrin,
John Walsh,
Josh Link,
MJ,
Mark Nivens,
Melissa Watts,
Michael Giacchino,
Ryan from Across the Bifrost, a Mighty Thor podcast,
and patron of the show, Jackson T. Overstreet. Thanks again for the comics, Jackson.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Yeah, Jackson was the guy we told you about at the top of the show who hooked us up with the entire Atlas Seaboard output. So we're rolling in heaven here. Rolling in clover. I guess we can go back here. We can do our final thoughts, I guess. So
sure.
What do you think, Jacob?
Yeah, I didn't know what to expect. Even though it's a fairly, nothing truly groundbreaking in storytelling happens, but I thought it was a great issue. I liked kind of the corny, old-fashioned heist in the beginning. I thought it was kind of goofy, and then, the origin was pretty good. Even though this is good, Ernie Colón, his art is awesome, Fleisher's writing was great, but like you were saying at the top of the show, it's just something off a little bit. Just a little kind of off-brand on this, and not just in the characters themselves, but just kind of in the execution. Just things are a little bit right of center that you can't understand or really articulate why, but it is.
Yeah, I had the same experience, and as much as I said I was kind of disappointed with just the fact that the first issue is an origin, which I know is completely normal, but it's just I wanted to see what happened with it. So I did read 2 and 3. I love this cover for 2. So this second issue was the same exact team we had here, and it's just him setting up shop in his own house. He's considered an eccentric by the local modern people. So he has like an open house, and people come visit. The police chief and his daughter, who's a young lady who finds him very interesting because he dresses in his colonial clothing with his same little ponytail and everything else. And so we get to see him kind of interacting with the modern people. We get a foil, the police chief, who's obviously going to be a problem for him in the future. The police chief gets called away because some criminal brothers are on a rooftop with hostages. And this whole thing goes down. And basically, he kind of just finds a way to get out of the party, bamfs there with the horse, bamfs to the rooftop, bamfs the guys to hell, and then bamfs back to the party. To me, what was kind of leading up to some of what I thought was kind of weakness in the setup, which is like he's kind of just the Beyonder, Thanos, it seemed like he just kind of takes care of biz and there's no stakes. So the second issue was interesting that I liked seeing the cast come. I liked seeing the potential love interest. But the third issue, they brought Tony Isabella in. So Fleischer was gone. I think he rage quit at some point around December of 74. And so Tony Isabella came in, Ernie Colón stayed on. And this is obviously a totally new direction for the book. They introduced a character called Brimstone, very son of Satan, like Brimstone's trying to tackle Satan and take control of hell. He deputizes a couple thugs and gives them superpowers. And we get to see the return of Sarah. Satan says, I don't want you to be all bored by yourself in the modern times. So here you go. Here's a soul to take with you. And Matthew's kind of pissed off about that. But and she has the ability to take over bodies. So she takes over the young love interest, the new character we met, and drives her around, like her body around, because they have to be able to use holy water to fight these infernal demons. And neither of them can touch holy water because they're both of hell. So they had to use her body, and so they puppet master her, and it's strange. I don't know if it would have worked, but it was an interesting turn. Much more the pulpy kind, not pulpy, but like the more goofy stuff we'd expect, like mid Son of Satan.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know. I like that Isabel was trying to steer it into a book that had some legs and some weirdness and just weird, because the first 2 issues were definitely kind of like where are you guys going with this? Like this, I'm not quite sure. There's no conflict or there's no stakes. So
yeah.
So between that and like, I love what Colón did through a lot of this. I don't know if he was the best fit. I feel like someone a little darker, like imagine like a Toth or a Grey Morrow or like someone like that with a little bit darker and a little more grounded art. I think would have probably been a better choice ultimately. I love what he did in here. There's stuff in here that blew my socks off, but there's other times where it's you kind of lean into the Harvey kind of stuff, and it looks like Richie Rich stopping somebody from robbing his vault. Like the fur thieves look like they could be robbing Richie Rich's house. Like it felt a little inconsistent in the, not in the quality, but just the tone. And so I found it a little confusing ultimately.
Yeah. Wow. Toth doing this that way, but he's at Atlas Seaboard at some point.
He contributes something to an anthology magazine we're going to read some stuff from. And they brought him in to revamp Scorpion before they even had any sales figures on Scorpion 1. And he worked the character up, and then they just kind of bailed on it and changed their minds, and it wasn't Marvel-y enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he used it for something else. Yeah. So I don't know. I was wondering if you would want to hear any letters from issue 3, the only letters, because they barely even were around long enough to get mail.
Yeah, I'd love to hear one of those.
Okay. I'll let you pick one. Let's have a look. See here. So it's called Ghost Cards. Get it? Like
okay.
Postcards. Yeah. All right. Actually, you know what, Jacob? There's one here that'll give us a little opportunity. Probably Jeff Roven writing these, wouldn't you think? The responses.
Probably, yes.
So it says, Dear Atlas. Atlas? Now wait a second. Just hold on. Who are you guys anyway? About an hour ago, I went down to the candy store and saw a whole new line of books under the name of Atlas. I know that name from somewhere, I told myself. Then on your info What's Happening page, I saw the name Martin Goodman. Now, I'm not a crazy fanzine man myself, but I do remember Stan Lee mentioning his name in connection with Marvel. So who are you guys? Are you a Marvel affiliate? Is Goodman still with Marvel also? Or is Atlas a new Martin Goodman enterprise? What about the name Atlas? Wasn't it Marvel's original name? I'm sorry if I seem more interested in the origin of your publisher than I am in the origins of your heroes, but I think it's important. Alan Rifkin, Worcester, Massachusetts. So whoever, probably Jeff, wrote back and said, we think it's pretty important too, Alan, and since we received countless letters to this effect, we will try and make everything perfectly clear by really starting in the beginning. In 1939, Martin Goodman published the first Marvel comics with a Timely logo. For a decade, comic magazines featuring the Human Torch, Submariner, and Jack Kirby and Joe Simon's Captain America captured a war-conscious America's fantasy. In 1949, with the country's interest in war-orientated heroes waning, Martin closed shop. But in the early 50s, Mr. Goodman found that he couldn't keep himself away from the comics business. The new company name was Atlas. To get the new venture off the ground, Martin hired some of the artists and writers from Timely, notably Jack Kirby, and a young editor by the name of Stan Lee. In 1961, with Martin Goodman's approval, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby produced the Fantastic Four, and the Age of Marvel was underway. Martin Goodman left Marvel in 1972. During 1974, he and his son Chip felt that some of the magic and charm that made up Marvel's formula for success was waning. They thought it would be an opportune time to start a new company, a company of new direction, of new ideas, of fresh talent. In other words, what Marvel was to the 60s, so shall Atlas be in the 70s and onward. And so the Atlas name was reborn. The man who fused together the most successful comic company in history was starting all over again. And believe us when we tell you that he hasn't forgotten the formula for success.
Wow, that's some
prime propaganda.
Company patter there. It's
very sanitized.
Very sanitized. I love that this is coming out in like issue 3 to where basically the wheels have fallen off.
Oh yeah.
And everyone's like, oh yeah, we're done.
Yeah. I think more than half the staff had already quit and been replaced, and people knew it was they knew it was done by this point, right?
See, I would just love it if Martin Goodman himself wrote this reply. That would make me really happy.
I imagine he was probably pretty checked out by the time, by January, right? I mean, I think he was just kind of less and less. He was angrier that things weren't marvelly enough for him, and he was probably just begrudgingly cutting checks and barely even showing up, I would think.
Probably. I love one last little funny thing of history that I liked from that CBA article is that talked about, like, after Atlas folded, it said all poor Martin Goodman had in his publishing company was swank. which was Armin Tamzarian's favorite magazine. So yeah.
That was the moneymaker from this whole venture was swank.
Swank.
Third tier Playboy knockoff,
third rate Playboy.
Tier? Yeah. So, yeah, There's some raves for Colón, his art in there. Just saying he did a good job as a coup getting him. But yeah, so we might revisit this at some point later. But there's a what's happening with Atlas. This is from this first issue where there's kind of saying like, here's everything coming. And one thing we neglected to mention at the beginning was that, Jeff, I think the original thought was like, let's do 5 to 7 books and just start kind of building up this thing, get some cred on the stands, blah, blah. And Martin's like, no, I need revenge and I need it now. So what was it? 23 books, something like it was
23 books,
a crazy amount of books. So trying to keep all these wheels in motion, spinning all of these plates, getting all of these things out, managing all these artists, all these writers. It was insane. And it was kind of just made to fail.
Yeah.
It seems. So, our next issue in 2 weeks, we'll be back to talk about Iron Jaw, which I'm excited to talk about. It's a barbarian book, and it's set in the distant future, post-apocalyptic barbarian kind of stuff. That's always an interesting read for me. But however, if you do choose to back us on Patreon, next week you will have a show you can check out, which is Jacob and I talking about House of Mystery number 311. It's an vampire story called By the Time We Got to Woodstock. CSN reference.
That's right.
So, that's that. And that was our first Atlas Seaboard.
That was great. I'm glad we started out with the Grim Ghost. I know it worked out chronologically, but yeah, I feel like that's a good entry point.
Yeah, I do too. And I'm glad we took the time at the beginning to kind of set the table in case folks aren't as familiar with it. I feel like if you're not a complete geek for 70s stuff, this might be just a blip or a name you might have heard. As people might have seen, if you are like online or in comics like social media, you might have seen that Atlas is trying to kind of stir something up again. And I believe in 2019, prior to COVID, they had a plan to kind of try to make an MCU type of thing. They wanted to make a Devilina movie and then introduce Grim Ghost and a couple other characters. I forgot who, but they wanted to basically start with an Iron Man, which would be Devilina, and then add a couple characters in and then have a big, some TV shows. They wanted to have some movies, and they launched a line of Mego figures for those characters at the Comic-Con in New York this last summer, this fall, whenever that was. And so, they're trying to get something together. They've done that in the past. There was a Grim Ghost like in 2011. They tried to do an event book where they tried to kind of bring a bunch of people back through a big world crisis. Okay, they made their own Crisis on Infinite Earths type of thing, and then reintroduced the characters, hoping to spin them all out. I checked it out; it wasn't for me, art-wise or writing-wise. So I didn't get past the first event book, let alone any of the new, short-lived series. I think it was as short-lived as the '70s stuff. So, do you have any regrets? Do you think we made a mistake? Is this crazy?
No, this isn't crazy at all. I'm all in. No, this is going to be fun
with Christy Brinkley.
Yeah, this is crazy.
Cool, folks. Well, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to email us at bronzeagemonsters@gmail.com. You can check us out there. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this issue or your memories, again, of Atlas Seaboard or anything like that. Any feedback you have, that's great. We're on Instagram at Bronze Age Monsters and Blue Sky and Threads. So those are the places you can find us. and here on YouTube. So subscribe to the channel, and we'll be doing these every other week. And love to hear from you. All right, folks. Thanks for checking this out. Until we meet again next week, stay bronze, Pony Boy. Stay bronze.